Hello, I am Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, and I am here to give you the updates on the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. So it's currently the eve of October 21st, 2023 in the United States, and the morning of October 22nd, 2023 in the Middle East. Starting with the aftermath of the October 7th attack, looking at the hostage situation. The Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, are now reporting that there are upwards of 210 kidnapped Israelis that are held by Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip. It is unclear at this point if this includes the two hostages that were released yesterday. In addition, Hamas announced today that the kidnapped soldiers and military personnel will only be released in a prisoner exchange, and this will only happen after Israel completely ceases its retaliations in the Gaza Strip. Relating to the hostage situation, Qatar today announced it is continuing its coordination with the United States in order to secure the release of more hostages. A spokesman for the Qatari Foreign Secretary stated, and I quote, "We are on the path towards the release of more hostages. It is unclear at this point if this is part of a negotiation with Israel or what this entails. We'll come back to this a little bit later." After his announcement, Secretary of State Blinken announced that he spoke to the Emir of Qatar, thanked him, and reaffirmed the strategic bond between the two countries. In addition, the Shabak, which is the equivalent of Israel's FBI, the unit that deals specifically with terrorism, announced that it has today established a new unit called Nili that is tasked with hunting down the Hamas Nukhba units, and these are the units, the commando units from Hamas that specifically infiltrated Israel on October 7th. Now going on to some of the ongoing fighting in the Gaza Strip. As I report pretty much every day for the last 2 weeks, there are continued missile and rocket barrages from the Gaza Strip targeting vast regions of the southern parts of Israel and to the center. So different kibbutzim and towns surrounding the Gaza Strip were hit by rockets today. In addition, there were missile attacks throughout the south in Ashkelon, Ashdod, Beersheva, Netivot, as well as to the center, to the Gush Dan area, targeting Bat Yam, Jaffa, and other cities in the center of the country. There was also an attempted infiltration of Israel from the Gaza Strip, likely by Hamas units. So this happened in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip near the town of Khan Yunis. However, the infiltrators were identified by the IDF and killed before they managed to cross over. The IDF continued its bombardments today into the Gaza Strip, targeting primarily Gaza City and the northern parts of the Strip. However, there were also attacks throughout the center and down south. In one of these attacks, the home of Talal al-Hindi, who is a commander in Hamas's military wing, was hit and he was assassinated. In addition to him, killed in this attack were his wife, daughter, granddaughter, and there are reports of several other dozens that are buried under the rubble of his house. In addition to this, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, there are upwards of 4,385 Palestinians that have been killed in the Gaza Strip since these retaliation began. These include 1,750 children. In addition, there are 13,560 people injured, and over 1,400 people are still considered missing, likely buried under the rubble of buildings in the Gaza Strip. Now moving on to some of the humanitarian side. Today, the first shipment of 20 trucks carrying humanitarian aid entered from Egypt through the Rafah crossing, carrying food, water, and medical supplies. This is after a deal was brokered in the last couple of days between Egypt, Israel, Hamas, under the auspices of the United Nations to allow the entry of this humanitarian aid. Now, just to give us some proportion when it comes to these 20 trucks, in normal times, in times not of war, upwards of 500 trucks a day enter the Gaza Strip through Israel and Egypt carrying humanitarian aid. So that is just to say that these 20 trucks are a start. However, as the UN announced today, it is a drop in the bucket compared to what is needed in the Gaza Strip in terms of such supplies. And several UN officials stated that the supplies that entered would help several thousand people for one day compared to what is needed. In addition, relating to this humanitarian aid, the New York Times today reported that according to several UN sources, despite Israel's requirement that these trucks be first inspected to make sure they are not carrying weapons, there was no such inspection carried out. Israel itself denied this allegation, stating that it actually does have control over what went in and these trucks were inspected. The United Nations said, the United States spokesperson stated that the next shipment of trucks would be inspected. However, after all this, the New York Times erased its story, so it is unclear what is happening there. As far as the Egyptian president is concerned, he stated that the Rafah crossing will remain open for humanitarian aid. But in relation to humanitarian aid, a top-ranking official in the Palestinian Authority suggested that Israel only allow these 20 trucks to come through in association with or in relation to, unclear exactly what it means, to the two hostages that were released yesterday. Israel, Hamas, and Egypt all rejected these claims, so it is unclear. Moving on to the West Bank, there were several different altercations between Palestinians and the IDF throughout the West Bank. A particular instance that is noteworthy is an air raid that was launched by the IDF against the Al-Ansar Mosque in the refugee camp of Jenin. Shabak later stated that Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad members were hiding out in the mosque and using it in order to store weapons for an imminent terror attack. There are reports of at least one Palestinian that was killed in this instance. In addition, the IDF took control of the home of the deputy leader of Hamas, Salah al-Aruri, in the West Bank. Noteworthy, al-Aruri is not in the West Bank. He himself is in Lebanon. His role in the current war is quite crucial, since he is the one who's always had a vision for Hamas to set up this multi-front attack against Israel, targeting Israel from Gaza, the West Bank, and southern Lebanon. So it is possible this is somewhat symbolic for the IDF to take over his home in the West Bank. In addition, there were several reports of settler violence throughout the West Bank, and in at least 2 instances, cars of Palestinians were torched in the village of Hawara. Now, moving on to the north. As I report every day, there are continuous low-level escalations between Hezbollah and the IDF in this ongoing game of who is going to break first and are things going to burst up into flames. So there were attempted infiltrations today in several different instances from southern Lebanon into Israel. The IDF struck several of these units from the air. There was also an anti-tank missile that was fired into a kibbutz, and there was an attempted firing of an anti-tank missile into Shlomi. However, the IDF also managed to take out that unit before it managed to fire its anti-tank missile. In these different altercations, there was at least one Israeli soldier that was badly injured. In addition, Israel continuously retaliated against Hezbollah targets throughout Lebanon during and after these different instances, and today Hezbollah stated that at least 19 of its people were killed since the war began 2 weeks ago. This is critical since Hezbollah would not commonly state how many people were killed in Israeli retaliations, and this could be part of Hezbollah building up a case in order to later state that this is why they ended up launching their war. However, in association with that, the IDF today stated that according to intelligence reports, Hezbollah has not decided if they are going to actually enter the war or not, that they are sort of hedging their bets and waiting to see what developments occur. And a final report regarding the north, the Minister of Defense Gallant, according to leaked sources, had suggested in the cabinet that Israel carry out a preemptive strike against Hezbollah in order to stop it from entering the war. However, this was vetoed by Netanyahu as a result of U.S. and specifically President Biden's pressure. Now, into some of the political developments that have occurred. There was a large-scale summit that occurred today in Egypt discussing the current escalation. The summit was attended by many different figures from the Middle East and Europe. Absent from the summit were any representatives of Hamas, Israel, or the United States, so the actors that may influence the fighting much more. At the end of the summit, there was no joint statement published, since different European delegates and, as it was reported, Western delegates suggested that any joint statement would have to include a condemnation of Hamas and stating that Israel has a right to defend itself. So, because there was no agreement on that, there was no final joint statement. Instead, the Egyptian president stated at the end that the war in Gaza reveals a flaw in the values of the international community, since there is an inexplicable hesitancy to condemn the killing of Palestinians. In addition, the UN Secretary General stated in a different statement that he condemns the Hamas attack on October 7th, however, that attack cannot serve as an excuse to collectively punish an entire population in the Gaza Strip. Other political developments: Prime Minister of Italy and the President of Cyprus are visiting Israel after attending this summit. And in addition, President Biden today evaded questions regarding whether he is pressuring Israel to forestall or hold off its invasion of the Gaza Strip until more hostages are released. So I remind everyone that yesterday it was reported that President Biden may be pressuring Israel, and in a question that Biden was asked, should Israel hold off, he said yes. The White House then later retracted this and said that Biden did not hear the question. So at this point, he's simply evading the question and stated, I am talking to the Israelis. And now on to some of the future developments in the Gaza Strip. So yesterday, if anyone missed yesterday's report, I do advise seeing at least the end of it, because this was the first time that Israel actually stated what are some of its goals in the war, what are some of its plans and strategic development towards defeating Hamas and what's going to come next. So echoing what was reported yesterday and stated by the Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, the Chief of Staff today of the IDF echoed what Gallant said and stated that the Army's first step in the ground invasion is going to take over parts of Gaza, conceivably he's discussing the north of Gaza, and destroy Hamas activists and its infrastructure. So that echoes what Minister of Defense Gallant said yesterday. In addition, according to reports in the Bloomberg network, Israel and the United States have begun more intense negotiations or at least discussions, regarding what is going to happen after Hamas is overthrown. Among these options, they are discussing, I'm quoting, a temporary government that will be backed by the United Nations and involve other Arab nations that will take control of the Gaza Strip. However, these talks right now are very preliminary, and they're still contingent on the idea of actually succeeding in overthrowing the Hamas movement in the Gaza Strip and taking control of the territory. What these reports do echo, though, are the claims that have been heard that Israel is trying desperately to find a way to not retake control of the Gaza Strip permanently, to not occupy it again. And this also comes amidst leaks from the cabinet meetings in Israel that hawkish elements, led by Itamar Ben-Gvir, are calling on Israel to take over the Gaza Strip and stay there, while other elements like Yoav Gallant are saying Israel does not intend to stay in the Gaza Strip. And it also echoes what President Biden said, that Hamas should be overthrown. However, Israel should not reoccupy the Gaza Strip. So this is all part of the ongoing talks between Israel and the United States. That is our report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.